Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to go over Module 3 with you. So Module 3 content is a little heavier than the content before, and the assignment you're asked to do is a little less intuitive. So if you think back to Module 1 where you're talking about symbols, and Module 2 where you're talking about different groups of influence on socialization, those things we can kind of relate to innately. Some of the concepts in these chapters get into more of the theoretical aspects of sociology that might not be so obvious as the two modules before this. So for that reason, I'm not going to cover overviews of these chapters as I did in the previous video. What I'm going to do is actually go through your assignment and explain it as well as I can in this format. So we'll go ahead and get in here. So this is Module 3. Covers chapters 6, 7, and 12. So this is groups, bureaucracy and formal organizations, as well as race and ethnicity. So as always, you have your objectives here. Remember, the objectives are just for your personal use, so you can track if you are understanding what you should understand after you read. They also might be helpful before you read so that you get an idea of what you're looking for. So the first objective here goes over groups. And groups are a really critical aspect of not only our socialization, but our connection to reality in our life. Groups form a buffer between us as individuals and the rest of society as individuals out there. So as you'll read, groups serve important purposes for us as we become socialized. So what you need to pay attention to as you read here are primary groups, secondary groups, and in-groups and out-groups. These are concepts you'll need to reference in your assignment. So that's chapter 6. Chapter 7 is about bureaucracy. So bureaucracies have arisen out of a desire to rationalize things, so to make things more efficient. And as you will see in chapter 7, there are two competing theories from Karl Marx and Max Weber about why we see bureaucracy, which I think is really interesting to read about. So as you're reading there, make sure you're paying attention to dysfunctions, because you'll discuss that in your assignment as well. And then the third chapter that you'll read is about race and ethnicity. So that might seem a little disjointed from these other two. You might be wondering how they're all connected at all. But race and ethnicity plays a huge role in groups and plays a huge role in bureaucracy. So we included that here to get you thinking about how these things are connected. So in chapter 12, you're going to think about the myth and reality of race, compare race and ethnicities, and then minority and dominant groups. So what you want to pay attention here is the difference between these groups, because they will help you as you are discussing how race is impacted by bureaucracy and groups and vice versa. So again, use those objectives to help you think about what you've learned and how you're on track with the module. So there they are. Next bit is the assignment summary. As always, the module will be open for 2 weeks. If you are in the 16-week section that started, I believe, August 17th, you'll see that these due dates are your due dates. But if you're in the 14-week section, which I'm also going to post this video to, and you didn't start until the end of August, these will be a little different. But for everybody, the date that your module opens, your first writing assignment is going to be due within 1 week. And we're back on the discussion board for Module 3. So Module 1 you had discussion board, Module 2 you had an essay, and now Module 3 we're back to the discussion board, and we'll alternate that way for the rest of the semester. So be sure to get your first post to the discussion board by October 5th. And because this is a discussion board, you will have 2 replies to peers. And then, as always, you have a test. And these are due on the last day of the module. So just be sure you're paying attention to, excuse me, paying attention to whatever dates are there for you. All right, and so on down into reading and writing assignment, which is where I'm going to spend most of my time. So again, your text summaries are here. If you haven't looked at those yet, I pulled up what they look like. So this is chapter 6. You can see an overall summary, some objectives of reading from the book, and then this nice little outline here. So this is probably pretty helpful as you are writing when you're pulling in different references to support your thinking. Anything you pull from here is Henslin, so it's the same as your textbook. And so instead of pulling it up on Blackboard or in the e-reader, or if you have the physical copy, you're welcome to use these to help you craft your responses. So that's all there. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. So let's get into what you're required to do. So again, you're on the discussion board, which you'll find over here. Just go to the link and you'll see it right there, discussion board, module 3 discussion. So you've got 4 questions to address that are all integrated and connected to chapters 6, 7, and 12. So your first question you're going to talk about is demonstrate why groups are so vital to society and to your own life. That's going to take a few sentences. That's its own thing that you need to do. So if you immediately jump into the second part and don't address this first part, you're missing something. So when you're talking about why groups are so vital to society, you can talk about how groups promote belonging, how they help us form relationships, how they give us support, the way that they serve as that buffer. Sometimes groups can even teach us about the traits that we want to exhibit one day, such as through reference groups. So make sure you're addressing that first sentence right there in a few sentences of your own. The next part of question 1 is to provide at least 2 specific examples of the roles groups play in your life and explain in detail. So for example, a primary group that I'm a part of, and I hope that all of you are a part of, is the family. So I have my family that I currently live with, which is my husband and my daughter. I can think about the role that that group plays, my husband and my daughter as a family group. So one thing they do is they give me purpose. I am a mother and a wife, and along with those things come responsibilities that I do. There's also some level of dependency there. So I depend on my husband to help me raise my daughter, to help me pay our bills, to help me around the house. And then in turn, he depends on me to do the same things. And my daughter, who's only 2, depends on us for almost everything. So that's one way that my immediate family group that I live with plays a role for me as a group. And then when I think more about like my own mother and father and my brother, sister-in-law, my mother-in-law, all of those things, I think about them combined with my group at home. They give me friendship and support. They help me form a sense of self. I can reference who I am compared to them. So like I said before, I'm a mother and a wife. I'm also a daughter to aging parents. All of these things come with different roles. So because the influences of these groups, I have different roles to play. Another group could be my work group. So I work with fellow instructors, I work with students, and these things also give me purpose because I really like what I do. I love to teach, I love to plan. When I work with students, I get to explore different concepts in sociology through their personal experiences. So I feel like I grow my understanding. When I work with my colleagues, I'm relatively young instructor, so I get guidance and support from them. And then again, they help fulfill my identity. So I consider myself an instructor and a teacher, and that's a big part of who I am. So those groups, my family and my work group, clearly play significant roles in my own life. So what you need to do is identify 2 of those groups as well and explain that. All right, so question 2 comes to in-groups and out-groups. So how might in-group versus out-group mentalities contribute to racism and xenophobia? Explain the role that culture, social class, and social status play in establishing in- and out-group mentality. So as you'll read in the book, in-groups promote loyalty. They signify virtues. They help us determine what's right and wrong. And then even more extreme, when we have really intense in-group loyalty, we can excuse the fault. So if you ever find yourself kind of making excuses for your significant other, or maybe extended family or whatever, that's because your in-group mentality is so strong, you want to protect them. And so the opposite of an in-group is an out-group. And out-groups are antagonistic. People we might label as bad guys. They're our image of immorality, people we don't want to associate with. So you can think about the influences of in-group versus out-group mentality on racism and xenophobia. So racism is when we believe one group is superior to the other. Xenophobia is fear of different groups. So you can think about the way that culture plays into this. So remember that values are part of culture. So when you have a particular value, maybe it's a religious value. Perhaps a religious value is that marriage is between a man and a woman. If you have that in-group mentality, that value can cause out-group mentality to cause discrimination and prejudice against members of the LGBTQ plus group. You can also think about social class. We judge other people, so maybe what they're buying with their EBT card. People often have opinions about that. Or on a more kind of extreme, you might hear things like eat the rich. So these in-group, out-group mentalities about social class come into play with our thoughts about how money should be distributed or spent, and our prejudice about different social classes. Social status, remember, status is a position in society that you occupy. So one of my statuses is American citizen. So I was born here and I am an American citizen. What we found is the status as American citizen also can create an in-group mentality against people who are undocumented. And so we see a lot of kind of slander against undocumented folks because of that out-group mentality. So those are a few ways that we can see racism and xenophobia in in-group and out-group mentalities. 3, connect the dangers of in-group and out-group consequences to theories of prejudice discussed in Chapter 12. So there are about 5 different theories. One ties prejudice to frustration, one to kind of insecurity and lack of education. What I would like for you to touch on here are the 3 major theories, functionalism, conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism, and what they say about prejudice. So they each have something to say about the way that prejudice can be functional, the way prejudice is used to divide, and the way prejudice contributes to stereotypes. So consider those and then think about similar consequences as I discussed for number 2. So that'll be for number 3. And then number 4, the influences of dominant groups on bureaucratic policy. So when you read in the text, you'll see that dominant groups are the groups that have held institutional power for a long time. And in the United States, this tends to be the white racial group. Men tend to have held institutional power. People from a Christian background have tended to hold institutional power. And then think about the way that these influences of the dominant group have affected minoritized groups. So one way this could be is thinking about hair, right? So there are these expectations of quote unquote professional hair that are often detrimental to the natural hair of people who are not white, because they're expected to adhere to more norms of white hair. We think about gender, maternity leave policies. There is no law in the United States that says maternity leave has to be paid. Because those policies were set by men who probably don't have to deal with that a lot, or the upper class who doesn't have to worry about missed income, we can see how that policy could negatively affect women who have to take time from work to take care of their bodies and their newborn babies while missing income in a very important time. So that's the way of thinking about question 4. So when you're writing this up, it's okay to number it. Obviously, APA is going to be a little fishy because you can't add, your reference page and your title page and all of that. So I'm mainly looking for your citations here. And I'm going to follow that up in a second video. So stay tuned. We've got about 5 more minutes of talking.